Because for some reason, if you turn off a bunch of the heads-up display stuff, you don't get the traditional Gran Turismo countdown to the start of the race sound, and that's one of the reasons I am immensely disappointed in Gran Turismo 7. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Blue Maxima. Pretty obvious what we're talking about, so I'll just get right into it. So, here's the thing, I only really played the single-player content, and even then I played it for about 7 to 8 hours before doing this video, because, well, 3 reasons. One, I never really liked the multiplayer in these games anyway, whether it be on the PS3 version, Gran Turismo Sport being entirely multiplayer, or this, because, well, it's going to be full of sweaty tryhards, and single player has always been my favorite anyway, so that's one reason. The other reason is that I actually bought the American digital copy, because my main PlayStation Network account is a US account, so when I bought this, I didn't know that it would lock me to only being able to race with Americans. And while the netcode does actually hold up that well, not that well, but pretty well, under the strain, it's still not a great experience, so I only ever did one multiplayer race. So, yeah, I'm not going to talk about the multiplayer component, because what I wanted Gran Turismo 7 for was the single player component, the new campaign. And I gotta tell you, man, I'm immensely disappointed, so let's go over it, I should say, because I'm not getting over it. I'm not getting over it for a long time. The first time we've had a Gran Turismo single-player campaign since the launch of the PlayStation 4, and they screwed it up. So, here's how the campaign works. It's incredibly on rails, which is already kind of against the entire purpose of Gran Turismo in the first place, because they basically recommend you your first car right off the bat. They basically force you down an incredibly linear series of races. They force you down an incredibly linear series of tutorials that you never really had to go through, instead being able to go through and figure them out for yourself. And you don't even get access to all the courses and all the modes from the beginning. And of course, there's the always online component, so if your internet decides to take a dump while you're in the middle of a race or just after you finished a race, it won't actually count for your progress. In fact, the first day that I played Gran Turismo 7, I played the Tokyo Expressway Championship, and my internet dropped out halfway through, so when I actually finished the race, it didn't count and I had to do it again. And I've heard stories of people having to go through worse when they were playing through parts of the campaign. So, yeah, that's already not great, but let me tell you about the actual, amount in the game itself, how it works. So you have this cafe. You go to the cafe, and you get a book of goals to do. And this book of goals is usually either win a championship, collect these 3 cars, which usually involves winning 3 separate races, or doing some tutorial thing, like looking at scapes, doing a mission, adding a wing to your car, etc, etc, etc. And you do these, and it actually unlocks you new tracks. And then they put all of the next event books, like events, on these new tracks. So you have to be constantly unlocking these new tracks to be constantly getting these new these new cars, these new tracks, and therefore these new things to do. And as I said, it's just incredibly linear, unlike something like Gran Turismo 4, where if you felt like it, you could go to the effort of getting all 3 of your licenses and getting, like, 3 cars, like really big cars, like get all golds on the license test, then sell the cars that you earn, use that to buy, like, a rally car, and then use that rally car to take on the rally events. You could do that. In this game, there is no way to do that, because you're stuck on to this track so heavily that there's no way you can afford to do anything else, because they give you so little in the way of credits that if you actually want to stand a chance at winning the events in question that will let you unlock more tracks, you have to spend all the money you get tuning up the cars that you win via the races in order to actually make them capable to win the next set of races, because the cars that you win are usually the cars that you'll need for the next set of races. So, you end up in this position where you've spent all your credits on something that you might rather not want to, because you have to go and progress in the game further to unlock more tracks and more events. And there's never any separate events available on the side. There's like 2 in the entire game that I've noticed in the first few hours that aren't ones that feel like a cop-out, because 2 of the 3 cars you got for pre-ordering Gran Turismo 7, which I did at the 11th hour just so I could download the game a little bit faster, 2 of the 3 cars that you got were cars that were GR3, which is like a racing rank, and there are a couple of events that let you race in cars with that racing rank and only that racing rank. And I feel like that was a gimme so that people actually had something to do with those cars. You can technically go and do like arcade races, drift trials, and time trials on any track that you've unlocked, but you don't get any rewards for it, and therefore I don't see the point. It doesn't even give you credits for time spent doing it, which just seems ridiculous to me. You do get a daily workout though, which gives you a roulette ticket every 42 kilometers that you drive, which is the amount that a marathon is. But these roulette tickets almost never give you anything better than the absolute worst prize, which is usually a couple of thousand credits. So I was never excited opening them after my 12 packer, where I got nothing but like the lowest one. And so I'd always get like a 5,000 or 1,000 or 10,000 credits, and that would be it. And that wouldn't be enough to like let me buy a new car and take that new car to a different track and do something different with it. That was always my favorite part of Gran Turismo single-player campaigns. If you were willing to bend the rules or tweak the way the game was expecting you to act even a little bit, you could go and do whatever you wanted. But in Gran Turismo 7, you are so heavily on rails that it just brought me down, if I'm being honest with you. Several hours of slowly unlocking features, waiting to be able to get something cool. And the only reason why I even had a slight amount of fun outside of just what they were forcing me to do and giving me no other option was because I got an AE86 and just like spent 100,000 credits tuning it up, giving it a handbrake, making it really light, and trying a couple of drift trials. It works. It actually works really well because everything inside the actual races themselves is great. The cars all handle like fantastically and handle according to their weight class and their power class, doing your tuning just traditionally in the Gran Turismo way. Weight reductions, racing computers, racing mufflers, changing the tires, changing the gear ratios. It's all here and it all works. It all does the job and makes the cars feel different every time you drive them. And tuning a car to be the way that you want it to be is really satisfying when you're doing it with the car that you actually want to drive around. And then, just on top of that, you do have a lot of ways to play around with the concept. You've got tons of photo-taking opportunities and replays. Again, you've got things like drift trials. That gives you a bit of freedom to play around with how your cars work. Scapes I'm not too impressed with because it's literally just a bunch of photos, and whenever you get like a car parked on top of one of these scapes, it just doesn't look natural. It sticks out like a sore thumb. It's not like Gran Turismo 4's absolutely fantastic photo mode, which had a bunch of different 3D rendered locations that you could drive cars into. But those were fantastic. I loved those. I spent so much time fiddling around taking photos of cars in them, but this just feels so unnatural. It literally feels like a step back from Gran Turismo 4, and I am genuinely downtrodden by this aspect. But of course, you've also got the DualSense controller, and that works fantastically as well. You can feel the pressure underneath the accelerator and the brake. They use the dynamic feedback of the controller to help you get an idea of what all the tires are doing, and the ways that the brake just absolutely freaks out when you're trying to brake too hard, when you're trying to go around a corner. It feels right. And so as a result, when you're actually driving a car in Gran Turismo, it works. It works really well. And not to mention that it's mostly gorgeous. I love being able to turn off all of the assist to drive in the just drive in the cockpit view, which is what the majority of this footage is, because it just looks smashing. If this sort of detail in the cockpits with like the different speedometer and odometer and just your rev counter and all of the different, you know, all of the details on the inside of the car, of the interior. If that is the price for having less cars, I understand why people are fine with having less cars, because this looks gorgeous. Except for rain effects. Rain effects kind of look like garbage. It's just like white dots splattering on the screen that get just like erased when the windshield wipers go over them. It's not realistic at all. It looks weird to me personally. But the environments are also really good, although that can kind of depend on the track, because I've noticed a lot of foliage pop in. That's really annoying. And I'll be honest with you, some of the tracks here just really don't take my breath away in the amount that I would hope. Like, I remember playing on something like this course right here, in the 10-minute 50 mark, that I just can't remember the name off for the life of me, but those windmills are absolutely gorgeous, the foliage is great, but then you play on a completely different track and it's got very little in the way of proper atmosphere and it feels like it's putting you to sleep. It also makes me miss something along the lines of Costa di Amalfi in Gran Turismo 4 and 6, because that was an absolutely fantastic looking track, and when you get a track that changes things up a bit, like the Tokyo Expressway, it looks so cool. But you do get a lot of these tracks that just don't have a lot of visual flair to them, but at least you've got a lot of the Gran Turismo staples, like Trial Mountain, Deep Forest, High Speed Ring, and of course you got a bunch of the others going on, like the Subaka Circuit. I don't know if that's exactly how you pronounce that. Mount Panorama is in it, which is kind of some neat Aussie representation going on there. Although I don't know if you'll actually be able to run like the Bathurst 500. I don't know what they bloody call it. I don't watch motorsports. But yeah, it does just, it looks good for the most part. It is a really good looking game. And I do appreciate that they give you the option where it's like, do you want frame rate to be important all the time? Or do you want us to drop it down to 30 and things like replays and turn on ray tracing and other graphical effects to make the game look really good? And I appreciate that they give you the opportunity to do that. Although it kind of gives this weird filmic look, like you're watching it on a slightly bad VHS tape or like a badly buffered YouTube video sometimes, where it feels like you're watching a video even though you're not. It's being rendered in real time to the point where you can pop out the camera and change the angle in real time. So I don't know what the deal is there. It must be something to do with the way they've been playing around with the video settings, but I was playing with this in 1080p the whole time, and it forces you to stay in 4K the whole time. So maybe the pixels being shrunk down like that might cause some kind of problem with the effects that they're using, but I'm not going to claim to know. I'm not that technically capable of understanding that. You know what's a real cunt, though? License tests. Holy shit, the license test. Especially license test A9. They need to make the gold timer shorter on that. Just no ifs, ands, or buts about it, because not only is it ridiculous, it proves a point that the ghosts actually get like a slight advantage on you speed-wise. And there's a setting called counter steering assistance that is up on strong. If you do not turn down that counter steering, you will not be able to get gold on that license test. It's on by default and they don't tell you about it, to the point where it looks like the bloody Honda NSX or whatever it is they use in that goddamn license test is just way better at cornering than yours is. I don't know why they always insist on giving you the absolute worst cars possible for the license test, but they do. And it's really, really, really fucking annoying, because it makes those license tests so much more rage-inducing than they absolutely should be. I've gotten gold on a lot of other license tests, and then one like that'll come out of nowhere, where the ghost is visibly driving a better car than me, and it can be really hard to tell why. It also doesn't help that some of these options are just weird. Like, I wanted the option to display the in-car stuff. Like, there's two different sets of UI you can have. There's the race stuff, which has like your position, your laps, your timer, your course map in the top right, and the positioning chart on the left side. And then you've got like a proper digital speedometer, some car-related stuff like a weather radar, traction control and all that, and another version of the course map in there as well. I wanted just that bottom UI on while turning the rest off, but I couldn't do that. And as I said before, turning off all the UI also gets rid of that countdown for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure why. It's genuinely kind of frustrating, and I'm not sure what the deal is with that. It also doesn't help that the license tests, back to the license tests, and back to the fact that the campaign is a linear piece of shit, it's that, you know how in license tests they prevent you from doing a lot of different races until you get the license test in like Gran Turismo 4, for example? In this game, it only prevents you from doing one race, but remember what I said before about the, the list of objectives you have to do require you to beat a race in order to get onto the next set of races? So it just ends up being an arbitrary one championship or one race blocker before you can move on to the rest of the races, at which point you don't need a license anymore. They don't list it as they don't even bother to list it as a requirement for the races that are after the one that requires the license test. So, I don't know why. Why would they bother? It doesn't make any sense. And there are some other minor things as well. Like, for example, as I said, there's very little in the way of side content outside of, the main campaign, where you'll only have a couple of extra side, races to do, and then that'll be it. You unlock missions later on, though, which give you some different stuff to do. It plays out like license test, where you'll need to do some overtaking, or you'll need to do some drifting, you'll need to do some passing, you'll need to do a drag race, things along those lines. They vary up the gameplay quite a bit, and you unlock them every time you get to a few different collector levels, which is basically how many cars you have. But because the game is so linear, it means, and you can't afford to buy any cars, even used cars cost kind of a ridiculous amount of credits now. And there's a reason for that, but I'll tell you about that in a little bit. But yeah, missions. You do a bunch of varied things. They change up the gameplay a lot. Why couldn't they have put them in a more proper world map? I have no idea. You can't search around the map for looking up better deals anymore. Every race is a rolling start for some reason. There's no grid starts anymore. There's no qualifiers, but the events are so short that it doesn't seem to really matter. And you know what? Another thing I'll praise the game for, just so I'm not constantly bagging on it, I really appreciate the fact that it doesn't seem to have disappeared up its own arse. It seems to absolutely love car culture. It's got a massive timeline of car manufacturers and what they do, or at least the ones that agreed to be in Gran Turismo 7, entirely reasonable. They have a bunch of individual descriptions for cars. When you're in the cafe and the guy's talking to you about all of the different cars that you've earned and why they were popular, it starts out feeling like Japan is just kind of blowing their own trumpets, I should say. It feels like they're blowing their own trumpets, but then they start talking about American cars as well in the same sort of positive, enjoyed light. And then you have individual descriptions for each car, and they're multiple paragraphs long. You have these fantastic views that you can look at inside just the My Car menu. There are just these... It has this... And what I'm trying to say is, in the cafe, when you get to go to a specific track for a specific championship, or when you go to a specific, when you're looking for specific cars, they give you these lovely three-dimensional shots just showing off their work when it comes to the 3D modeling they've done, or just making these places look good without feeling like they've disappeared up their own arse, trying to appeal to the young kids looking at you, Forza. It's kind of refreshing, which is why it's so disappointing that the single player feels as restrictive as it does. And then, of course, we've got to get onto the fact that there's microtransactions, because as I said earlier in the video, there's a lot of there's one microtransaction, but it's big. You can buy credits now. So that means that all of the cars in the used car lot have had their prices jacked up significantly. I don't think I've ever seen one go for less than 20 to 30,000 credits. Now, it is possible to grind out those credits, but you're doing them on older races that you've already beaten before, and it just feels like a waste, again, because they were able to put in so many different events in so many different circumstances in something like Gran Turismo 4. It worked so well in that game, and I don't understand why they went backwards except to make money. And of course, you can go buy new cars, but they cost a ton of credits as well. And you can go buy legendary cars, but those cost even more credits. Tuning cars is also really expensive. Even just the really cheap ones find themselves having some incredibly expensive tuning parts. And even then, they take so long to unlock those tuning parts that it feels kind of unreasonable. It's kind of annoying. So, you just kind of end up in a position where you feel like you're being really forced onto the railroad, or you're going to cough up some credits to buy some cars that are actually cool, but even then you won't be able to use them because you haven't played through the requisite events yet. I kind of hate it. I feel like it goes against everything Gran Turismo 4 stood for in the freedom to choose where you wanted to go in this world focused on cars. Instead, you're just doing this really long and really frustrating linear path where you're doing what they tell you, goddammit, and you will enjoy it. Otherwise, you won't get to race on 90% of the tracks. Hell, I've been playing for 8 hours, and I haven't even unlocked the Nürburgring yet. I literally just got the thing that would let me unlock the Nürburgring. And I'm just genuinely annoyed that it took me so long to unlock such a prestigious track. And I don't see the point. And I know that I'm eventually going to be forced to do the International B license instead of going around and seeing what I could do with the A license. I know it's going to have to force me to do the IA license eventually as well, and there's probably going to be the Super too. And just for one championship. But I tell you what the real killer factor is for me, and this is kind of what made me give up on actually giving the game a go. The AI. They suck, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. They will try and run you off the road. Early on in my game, I was trying to be as clean a racer as possible. I was failing sometimes because A, I suck, B, I was probably driving a car I was unfamiliar with, so I didn't know how well it would accelerate and brake, but even then the game does kind of try and give you a benefit of like extra credits if you do a clean race, which is don't hit anybody and don't go off track. Perfectly reasonable. Now, if only they wouldn't try to run you off the track themselves. The AI has literally tried to run me off the track in half a dozen different races. It's gone and pushed me off the track by itself, and that has cost me a clean race bonus. Not to mention they just seem to like, it's kind of like playing against aggressive Forza multiplayer drivers. They'll get in front of you and brake to try and get you to slow down. They don't seem to have any concept of the world outside them, so they'll end up getting into a 4-car pileup on a turn on the Daytona International Speedway. They just suck. They're just not that fun to race against. They have no dynamic driving to them whatsoever, and it just makes them, when they're not actively aggravating me by trying to push me off the track, they're just boring. And no amount of being able to customize my car, both with a fancy livery editor and being able to customize my dude or download online liveries off the net, no amount of that is going to make up for that. No amount of fancy spots to take pictures is going to make up for that. No amount of car culture is going to make up for that. No amount of impressive handling, fantastic graphics, and just enjoyable to drive cars is going to make up for the fact that I feel like I'm being strangled by this game's linear campaign system. And I don't like it. It doesn't feel like Gran Turismo. Who knows, maybe I've got rose-tinted glasses on and I'm remembering Gran Turismo 4 a bit differently than it was actually the case, but look, I remember being able to just like slam all of the licenses in Gran Turismo 4 and then go and sell the cars I got from that and then do whatever the hell I wanted. And I enjoyed that. I don't know why they insisted on taking it out of this, and I don't even know if this is going to have some of the cooler events or cooler tracks. I know they put out the track list, I just never actually had a look at it. And it's going to be like Gran Turismo Sport, where they're going to be updating it over time, you know, right? More tracks, more cars, more a bit of everything, really. And I just based on what I've played, no thank you. I don't want to play it anymore. I'd rather go back to Gran Turismo 4 turn the internal graphics up to 4K and play that through an emulator, I'll probably have more fun. I'll miss these fancy interior views, but outside of that, it's about the same for me personally. I mean, sure, I'm not going to have the fancy controller either. I'm not going to have a couple of other things, but yeah, just don't care. So, great driving mechanics, great customization, and really good amounts of car culture that doesn't feel like it's got its head stuck up its own ass, is really let down by an incredibly linear campaign, focused on microtransactions, some weird problems, and weird just like things that have been left out, always online BS, and just, yeah, I've already gone over it in this video already. I'm pretty sure you don't need to hear it twice. Personally, I just can't recommend it. And it's a shame because, well, I love Gran Turismo. I'm bad at it, but I still love it. Although it's mainly going to be Gran Turismo 4 now, isn't it? With that said, this has been Blue Maxima. I'll see you all next time.